Hello, it is Monday, February the 13th. It's actually not, but let's pretend that it is because that's when you're going to be getting this video. I'll tell us that when it comes to the week, the first 3 days of the week belong to the previous Shabbat. That's why halachically, if you had missed Havdalah, you can continue saying that bracha until Tuesday afternoon because the first 3 days of the week belong to the week before. You wouldn't do the Aish, you wouldn't do the Samim, but as far as Hamadim Kodesh, all that you would do. So therefore, let's take a few minutes to speak a little bit more about the Parshat of the Shavua of Pashat Yitro, which has just passed us. So when it comes to the mitzvah of Shabbat, so Zachor Dom Shabbat Lakacho, one can't help but notice the fact that it says Zachor in this week's Parsha, but it says Shamor in Parshat Ve'etchanan. And why is that? Because Zachor and Shamor represent two different aspects to Shabbat. One is positive and one is negative. The positive side of Shabbat is fulfilled through only one specific mitzvah, and that is making Kiddush. The negative side of Shabbat is avoiding all of the mitzvot lota, say, all of the work, which Chazal tell us through Torah Shabbat Peh in our Mishnah, is determined by 39 specific acts of work that we used in the ongoing use of and creation of the Mishkan itself, like cutting and carrying and cooking and so on and so forth. Both those things are necessary. It's kind of like a push-pull. I have to be able to retract and pull away from all the creative work that I was doing to be able to focus then properly on the fact that Shabbat is making holy. There are many questions that people will ask about writing and about carrying, etc. But I always seem to get a lot more questions about mitzvah aseh. That is to say, can I do this on Shabbos? Is it Shabbos-dik? Is it not? And that all falls in the category of the Zachor aspect of Shabbat. While something may be actually legitimately permissible in Shabbat in terms of it not violating the negative side of Shabbos. For example, can I leave my television on a Shabbos timer so I can watch the playoffs on Friday night? And therefore, if I use a timer, like I use a timer for my lights in my house, so how is it any different if I let the TV go on at that time? And the answer is, while it's true, you will not have violated the Shamor aspect of Shabbat, but the Zachor aspect of Shabbat, of remembering that today is a distinctive day that's unique, that's pretty much out the window. And therefore, people would interrupt their Shabbos meal to head over to the television and watch TV. So the aspect of Shabbos, you probably forget the fact that today is Shabbat. And that's an important idea. When it comes to remembering that today is Shabbat, one has to do those things that make us cognizant all day long today is Shabbat. For many people, that has evolved into the customs that we have by having a special tablecloth and special kinds of food and special kinds of clothing, because whenever I look around, it is completely distinguishable that today is a day different than any other day. In fact, when I was a kid, it was very common that we had what was called Shabbos play clothes, right? Our parents didn't want us to ruin our suits or our fancy clothing, so after shul, we came back and we would change not into regular weekday clothing or shorts and sneakers, but we would change into Shabbos play clothes, rubber-soled shoes with a pair of dark pants and a light polo shirt, so that even though we were playing, we weren't learning Torah all day long, but we were playing. It was clear as day that it was definitely Saturday, it was Shabbat, it was a unique day. I want you to keep that in mind when one goes through Shabbat, to make Shabbat a holy day and make it a day that's clearly distinguishable. And therefore, if you look at someone, you can tell it's Saturday, it's Shabbat, then you're in the right frame of mind. If you look at someone you can't tell it's Shabbat anymore, that should be the signal in your head that, hey, you know what, maybe if I'm in my bathing suit with my tanning lotion on in front of the pool, maybe I'm losing the aspect of Shabbat. It's great to enjoy a great walk in the sun on Shabbat. It's great to enjoy the weather wherever you are. But let's make sure that Shabbat is discernible. When anybody would look at me or talk to me, it's clear that it's Shabbat. In addition to that, one should think about what the nature of Shabbat is supposed to be about. Is it a day of rest or not? And I spoke about this in my class earlier in the year. Shabbat is a day of rest, but what is rest? Is rest simply the cessation of work? Or is rest something more than that? Kind of like light and darkness. Is darkness a thing, or is it simply the absence of light? And I would posit to you that when Kadosh Baruch Hu decided to rest on Shabbat, which of course is anthropomorphic because God doesn't really need to rest, it means he rested so that we could rest, and that rest was something in and of itself that was created for Shabbat. Shabbat is not a day to do nothing. Shabbat is a day to do something. But what am I supposed to be doing? Well, in the same way as I have to take a break from my work to be able to have a business meeting about work and think of how do I make more money, how do I lower my expenses and increase my revenue, thus increasing my profits, I have to stop working while I'm having that meeting to be able to focus more on work. Likewise, we have to stop doing all of our productive acts of work that we normally do to be able to think about how to make our lives more spiritual. This past week that I spent enough time with my children, with my wife, learning Torah, and if I was lacking in that regard, Shabbat may be the time to dedicate some of that time to be better as far as that, and to think then maybe next week will be better. If I was derelict in some of my duties towards my parents, my siblings, my community last week, maybe I'll resolve this coming Shabbat to spend more time on it on Shabbat, and in the coming week to carve out some more time to be better about that as well. Hoping that this past Shabbat was a beautiful one, so will next Shabbat be, and all future ones will keep in mind to have the spirit of Shabbat present all the time. Enjoy the rest of the day.